Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to, gosh, it must be our third or fourth webinar that we've been delivering. Certainly the first of this year, anyway. Brought to you by ourselves, HR Planner. We're a HR software organisation, and today with one of our partners. The good people at Target HR, and Jane in particular, who are very knowledgeable in all things HR consultancy wise. So Jane's going to talk to you a lot, obviously, about employee engagement. I'm going to follow up after Jane has finished with her part, maybe in 25 minutes, 30 minutes or so, just with a run through of a couple of aspects of our HR Planner software, some of the tools and features in there that are specifically aimed at helping with employee engagement. One bit of housekeeping. We are recording this to share with attendees who can't make the live version. So I can't imagine that we'll be sharing any images or chats or anything of that. But if you were worried about camera settings and so on, feel free to change those clearly. With that, Jane, if you're ready, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for the invite, and good afternoon, everybody. Really happy to be here and looking forward to explaining and debating the topic of employee engagement, particularly in this complex world we live in. I understand from previous sessions, if you've got questions, you're more than welcome to unmute and ask those questions, or if you want to pop them in the chat, please do. If I miss the chat because I'm in full flow, I'm sure Steve will call them out for me and I'll absolutely pick them up at the end. So we're going to have a little look at what is employee engagement. I'm going to share some of the key drivers, think about how we can really drive high performance by focusing as an organisation on engagement, and perhaps share some tools and techniques. I'll also bring to life some stories from my HR experience and organisations that I've worked with to give some tools and techniques as to the things that I've done to help drive high performance by getting really great employee engagement. And I think if we take a minute to think strategically for a second, why is employee engagement at the heart of any business right now? Well, we were just chatting with a colleague who's got a little bit of flu or potentially COVID, and in a post-COVID environment, the world has changed. Hybrid and flexible working systems are very much at the heart of many organisations, trying to navigate through whether you have hybrid, whether you have people working in the office all the time or part-time. And the decision making for this is really, really complex right now. What the employee wants and what you want as a business can be quite difficult. We've seen the increase of AI and what that looks like and what it feels like, and it's moving at speed. At a practical level, I am seeing many CVs now that have absolutely been developed by AI. I'm seeing employees using AI to draft emails. Some of that is great, some of that is not so good. If I think about when I first joined an organisation back in the day, there was no conversation about mental health. There was no conversation about well-being. When it comes to an employee expectation and employee engagement, those topics are expected for employees to provide now. That is a baseline. It isn't a nice to have, it is a baseline. As is being inclusive and looking at that sense of belonging, looking at your DEI and where you're going and what you're doing. And I think for all of us, where we want to get to in this complex landscape is really being able to make data-driven decisions. And that's certainly where HR Planner can give you that support and guidance. Before I go into the topic of engagement, I guess I just want to share a little bit about Target HR, who I work for as a consultant. And they very much specialise in small to medium-sized businesses where they perhaps haven't got a full-time HR practitioner. And the aim is to take the stress out of that people management piece, to provide pragmatic, commercially focused support when you need it and how you need it. For example, looking at employment law, building engagement, building high-performing teams. They do offer a retained service that can ensure your policies and procedures are always up to date. So it might be worth having a little look at Target HR or reaching out to their free health check to see where you sit within that. So I thought would I start with a really powerful statement, because I truly believe this statement is key in all we do. If you as an organisation are going to win in that marketplace, first of all, you've got to win the hearts and minds of your employees, because that internal drive delivers those external results. And as we're in 2025, I hand on heart can say there isn't just a single initiative that will solve your challenge or your strategy for employee engagement. It's a continuous effort that combines technology, regular communication, checking in on your values, checking in on your culture to see how you are aligned, to understand what your team want and what your business needs. And I really do think it's more complex than ever. Back in the day when I first started out in HR, personnel as it was called then, things were quite simple. We'd have a 6-monthly appraisal. We'd talk about maybe a summer party and a Christmas party for the team. You'd maybe do a 6-monthly brief. But the world has moved faster and quicker than ever before. Social media updates us on the news, when back in the day, we listened to either the 6 o'clock or the 10 o'clock news. Our expectations are one of quick return and honest conversation. As I was preparing for this webinar, I happened to actually take some items of clothing back to Next, and I popped it in the shop, and it really helped me think about our expectations as employees. I returned my jeans, they asked my name, they asked me to confirm my email address. The return was done. The money was back in my bank. Think how quick and slick we expect as customers things to happen. And as a business, our teams expect that as well. So my first reflective question to you is, think about your team, think about your employees. What is it that they are wanting? And then align that to what your business requires. There'll be things that really do correlate, but there may be things that clash, and navigating through that requires quite a lot. I thought I'd spend a bit of time just unpicking the different elements when we come to employee engagement. And it really is about thinking about what employees are thinking, what are they feeling, and how are they acting? And the lens that you can have as an employer is observing those 3 elements. Thinking about how are they performing, how are they undertaking meetings, can give you some indication of happiness. Only last week I was on site in an engineering company, and we'd had a PDR review with their head of technical. We'd had a really great PDR where we'd talked about some complex stuff that this individual was doing. But we'd noticed as a result of the PDR, how they were acting didn't line up with the conversation that happened in the PDR, their personal development review. And we had 2 choices. We could either ignore it or call it out. So we brought that person in and we had a cup of coffee. And the reality was there was one piece in that conversation that they had heard differently to how we had communicated it. And that had seriously demotivated them. They're a high-performing individual that signs off a lot in that organisation. Not noticing how that person was behaving would have been massively detrimental to the organisation. And nipping it in the bud with a transparent and honest conversation between the 2 of us really made a difference. It's making sure that you're observing all those elements of your employees. And that's really hard in a virtual world. It used to be easy when we were all in the office and we could have what I call those cup of tea conversations. Now you need to take the time when you're on a Teams call to just observe how people are doing, how people are feeling. I can break it down further using a model by Dan Pink, and I'd encourage you, if you were interested in this topic, to have a little Google about Dan Pink and a great book by Drive. Some of you may have read it. But whilst money will always be a motivator and a baseline for everybody, there's very few people, if they won the lottery, would continue to work as they currently are. They may do some work, but not in the working environment that they're in. So we have to understand that money is a baseline. But once people are being paid fairly and to the standard that they think is considered acceptable for them, money no longer continues to be the main motivator. If you think about when you've issued pay increases of any form, whilst there's a short spike in employee happiness, it doesn't normally continue for very long. So people look for more within their role. More than ever, they look for more within their organisation. Their internal motivator comes from having autonomy, the ability to be self-directed, mastery in terms of having the skills and knowledge to do the work effectively, and really connecting to a purpose of why I'm working for you as an organisation. And this is really the key to unlocking not only engagement, but the output of engagement, which is high performance and productivity. And I know when Steve talks about the system shortly, he'll be able to share some of the tools and techniques that support you in that. But just take a second to reflect. When did you last really shout about the purpose of your organisation? When did you last take time to really think about the skills and knowledge of the team, their performance and their catch-up? An annual appraisal for most organisations now is far too late. The speed in which you're having to be agile to react and respond to the marketplace requires much greater frequency of conversation and dialogue. We need to also acknowledge that every sector is very, very different, and taking the time for you to think about your own organisation is so key. I used to work in the restaurant trade. We had 26 sites throughout the UK, and we were a branded restaurant, so it was important that we had consistency. One of my personal biggest challenges were our head chefs. Chefs are creative and innovative and want to be able to allow to do their own thing. But they were stifled working in a branded organisation where whether you ate up north or down south, our customers expected consistency. And so we had to address this by creating annual challenges for our chefs, where they created a dish and that dish went on the menu for a period of time. Because it's the only way we could tap into managing a chef's expectation and giving them autonomy whilst balancing the needs of the organisation. So for me, autonomy is about giving people time to feel in control of their day, of their role, and not being micromanaged. How many managers do you know in your business that have an issue with trust, that perhaps do micromanage on a regular basis? If you think about mastery, creating a culture where everybody wants to continuously improve, and that is a non-negotiable for many organisations now. We are moving at such speed, we need to get regular feedback on how we're performing in terms of our knowledge and our skill. And checking in with your employees on a regular basis through surveys, through one-to-ones, through team meetings, through roundtable conversations can be so powerful. One organisation, I do quarterly roundtables, and it's a really great check-in to understand how people are thinking, how people are feeling, and where do they believe their skill set needs to be in a fast-paced, changing organisation. And purpose has really become a key element for employment. Can you describe your purpose of your organisation to help your employees connect to you? And I say that incredibly respectfully, because many organisations are quite complex, but employees need to connect to that purpose. We know that the young generation coming out of university and looking for work is actually choosing organisations for their alignment to their purpose. How much are you talking about that on your social media channels, in your literature, in taking yourself to market? People want to be able to have a contribution. They want to feel like they're doing something significant and something that matters. And for every organisation, that can be translated. But when did you last get everyone together and help bring that message to life? So in terms of the basics from an engagement point of view, autonomy, mastery and purpose is a really great check-in. So now let's pay a little bit of attention to what our employees need, what they want, and where they go. And we can get this so wrong. So it's really taking the time to do your research to understand how people are thinking and feeling. I did a piece of work in a law firm a few years ago, and it blew my mind how the different clusters of employees expected different things. Newly qualified lawyers wanted the chance to work autonomously on big clients to get their names on their CVs. Lawyers that had been there 3 to 4 years wanted investment, wanted the clear career path, wanted the chance to know that they're going to be promoted. And the partners of the organisation, their motivation was more about their full benefits package, knowing that they're being rewarded with, for example, healthcare, with car parking, with good holidays, to have the sustainability with a really interesting and dynamic client list. So taking the time to understand your team is really, really important. Again, if I think about my hospitality sector, individuals that are on minimum wage and on 0 hours contracts value more than ever a chance to get a hot meal. And we made sure that in all of our restaurants, you could have a hot meal for either free or considerably discounted. That did 2 things. It made sure people were fed and nourished when they were working under my watch, but it got them excited about our brand and our new dishes, and it meant they could talk to customers. When we surveyed them, the discounted and free meals was far more important to them than any Love to Shop voucher for a competition that we run monthly, bi-monthly. So my question is, and a takeaway tip from this session is, do you know what your team are thinking and feeling? Do you know what your leaders are wanting? And what are you trying to do to juggle that? And when we think about trying to juggle that, I just want to take a minute to think about the difference between satisfied employees and engaged employees. I work in many organisations where culturally you can feel the satisfaction as opposed to the engagement. And how I unpick the difference personally is the difference is if you've got satisfied employees, they mainly focus on what's in it for me, what will I get, and they will do their job very well. If you focus on engagement, it's about what am I passionate about? What can we give back as a team? There's more of an emotional commitment and an enthusiasm to delivering results. So take a minute to think about where you are on that scale. Satisfied employees or engaged employees? And when we think about the benefit of engagement, you'll see I've put some examples on there in terms of why take time to not only hop on this webinar today, but to look at why the investment far outweighs just being happy with satisfied employees. We're in an environment now where trying to recruit and retain is difficult. We've got the biggest performance and productivity challenges and a complex operating environment. What you need is your team to be able to react and respond to wherever you need to go. If they're passionate and committed to your purpose, if they have the autonomy to make those decisions, and they've got a dynamic skill set that means they can support you, high performance very much follows. But that requires a lens by yourself as managers to think about how you dial that up. Think about the key to employee engagement and what makes it. I think the key element here is taking some numbers. It's looking at your employee retention. It's measuring motivation through surveys. It's noticing the number of sick days. It's noticing how many grievances or disciplinaries you have. And taking some time to say, what does that data tell you? And again, I'm sure Steve will be able to talk about that shortly. An engagement strategy is not just an annual survey. It is a holistic approach where you take time as managers to think about what drives your employee engagement, what's important to the team right here, right now. One organisation we have, Friday Fish and Chips, is a non-negotiable. If we ever pulled the Friday Fish and Chip piece, we would have outrage. It's embedded and it's part of what they do. What are the things that make a difference for your organisation? But fundamentally, we have to own and drive employee engagement. And I guess if I break that down into a little bit more detail for you, the top priority for me is having inspiring leadership. Are you investing in your management and team leaders so that they create a sense of value? They take time to make people feel part of the organisation. How much recognition or reward are you doing? And I don't necessarily mean loads of pay rises. I mean those moments in a team brief, in a note, in an email, in a shout out to say thank you. How much are your team really involved in problem solving? Do they feel safe enough to voice their ideas? If you're running team meetings and there's silence, that says a lot about the psychological safety and the satisfaction or engagement of your team, and it gives you an indication. As your organisations move forward enough to think about health and well-being of your team members and where that sits, and is that reflected in your latest policies and procedures? Take a minute to unpick those steps around leadership, recognition, engagement and involvement in decisions, and thinking about that agenda of health and well-being. And depending on your budget, yes, you can throw a lot of money at this, but often it's not about the financial side. It's about the time, and it's about the effort, and it's about the leadership shadow of those managers that execute the day-to-day culture of your organisation. So I think it's important to reinforce that one size doesn't fit all. And whilst there is a lot on LinkedIn, and I love the benefit of LinkedIn for all of us to get best practice, it's important that you take time to think about what engages your employees, thinking about their profile, their age, their length of service, what they do, the dynamics of your organisation. I personally find when I was at the restaurant that the roundtable activity really helped me understand what was important to individuals. I've already mentioned the food is important, but one of the other things that came out from that roundtable is a sense of pride for working for that organisation. And what we developed is a really low discount for people to bring their friends and family during the month, because actually what they wanted to do is share their pride about the brand of that organisation. What was also important to them was the chance to have a good celebration. As we know, in hospitality, Christmas is a very busy time. And one year we cancelled the parties in January due to financial pressures. And genuinely, it was about trying to save jobs. The message and the damage that did to that team was catastrophic. People felt really disengaged because they'd worked so hard over Christmas. So I knew that also a good celebration party was important. Now, not in every organisation will that be the case. So the biggest challenge for you is to really develop a customised approach. Don't just jump on the bandwagon of things you see on LinkedIn or what your neighbour's doing or what your colleague's doing. Really look at the unique blend of strategies that you need for your organisation, aligning the organisational drivers and triggers, aligning your budget and your policies and procedures so that you really make sure it's bespoke to what you need it to be. It becomes a focus. It really does need a plan. And an engagement plan is not a document that sits on your system. It's a plan that needs to stay alive, that sits in the relevant management meetings or board meetings, that has clear objectives about what you're trying to achieve, looking at retention, looking at satisfaction and engagement, looking at absence, looking at all those numbers that we've talked about. Another stat I use a lot of is, would somebody refer a friend to you to come and work for you? Because that's quite a powerful measure of engagement. So set your clear objectives. Ensure you do regular surveys, either online or face-to-face. Those pulse surveys online can be really, really powerful and give you an insight. Again, if you think about our expectations of feedback, go back to my next story. An annual survey is too slow nowadays. Frequent short surveys really help get a feel for how people are thinking. And lean into the hard stuff. We know that some people will be unhappy because you can't afford to give them pay rises right now. But lean into it and face it, because transparency and honesty drives engagement over hiding and avoiding a difficult conversation. Think about 360 feedback from managers to actually get a gauge as to how competent and confident your managers are. And also take advantage of individuals who are leaving and give them a chance to speak to somebody or conduct exit surveys to get a feel for what is actually happening. Put your recognition programs within your employee engagement strategy to look at how you celebrate successes, calls out, small awards, anything like that can work really well. An employee of the month or an employee of the quarter, where individuals vote for the person who's living the values, creates a real sense of community. And it's amazing what a small bottle or a certificate or a box of chocolates can do to an individual, because you've made a fuss and they feel valued. Using tools that I'm sure Steve will be talking about shortly, make sure you analyse and interpret the data. Set and monitor milestones and be comfortable and confident that you change your direction of travel when it comes to employee engagement. It is complex, it's forever changing, and that's okay. But have the heart of employees at all you do, because that will drive productivity, that will drive high performance, and fundamentally that secures your business. So I'll open up for any further questions in a second. But actually what I'd lead with you is invest in your people, because once they're emotionally invested in you, they will absolutely deliver that high performance that you need. And Simon Sinek, who's a quote on there, if you've not had any experience in him, he's a really great thought leader. And I'd certainly encourage you to have a little look at what he does and what he says. So I hope I've shared some food for thought. I hope I've given you some interesting debate and discussion and shared some stories. I don't know whether there's any observations, questions, anything that you would like to ask me on employee engagement. I'm mindful that we've got different sectors and different sizes on here, so very happy to try and respond to your particular challenge when it comes to employee engagement at this time. But thank you very much for listening, and I'll hand to Steve to facilitate the next step.
Cool. Thank you, Jane. Interesting and informative as usual. Well done. Let me just share my screen. Let's have a go at that. Nope, that's wrong. Where are we? There we go. So, as I mentioned at the beginning of the session before, I'm going to talk to you, I'm going to show you just a couple of things as to, or a couple of features, a couple of tools in our HR Planner software that can help directly with employee engagement. But before I do that, I think it's probably quite useful to show you HR Planner a little bit more broadly, so the employee engagement aspects of it have a little bit more context, really. So with all HR Planner, or with all HR software, sort of modules you would expect, absence management is normally top of the list, and yes, there's a full comprehensive absence management section within HR Planner. So employees can raise leave requests, and it doesn't matter what type of leave. You can add in as many leave types as you wish into the system. So yes, holiday and sick leave and absence and so on. But training and maternity leave and time off in lieu, there's no limit to the number of leave types that you can add into the system, and employees can just request time off and submit those to their authorizers. There's clearly as well, a calendar view, so employees can see when their colleagues are in and out of the office and can make informed decisions about when they will make their leave requests. And of course, behind the scenes, there's numerous tools which help you just align your absence management as well. So things such as whether leave allowances are given in days or hours, your part-time working patterns can be put into the system, controlling how many employees can be away at any one time, whether or not unused leave can be carried over from one year to the next. These sort of things, the tools are behind the scenes there, so you can very easily align how absence works in your organization with how absence works in your HR planner system. As well as absence management, there is a company contact directory. And all employees have access to this. And just before I start, or before I go much further, this clearly isn't actual information. I'm not sharing anything here that I shouldn't. But your company contact directory is really where employees can see contact information and work contact information about their colleagues. So email addresses, telephone numbers, departments, job titles, that sort of thing. So whilst all employees have access to this, you as an HR person are in control of what information is shown here. So if you didn't want to include email addresses, they can be hidden and so on. And as well as work information, there's also more detailed private information about each employee as well. So each employee has their own record on the system here. And again, an employee wouldn't necessarily have access to this other than the information about themselves. You're in control of that. But here, for each employee, this is where you can now start capturing private information. So home addresses, phone numbers, emergency contact details, and so on, and more detailed employment section too. So when the employee started with you, what their probation length might be, their notice period, and so on. These are all the sort of common fields that you would expect. But the great thing about HR Planner is that you can add in any field, any attribute that you want to capture information about employees, whether it's car registration details or languages that an employee speaks, known medical conditions, and so on. Again, no limit to the number of types of fields and attributes that you can add in to capture that information. Third major section of HR Planner is documentation. So yes, you can upload documents into the system as well. And there's two areas for these. One is here in, one of a better phrase, your public directory, really, public being your employees, your staff. So here you can upload your documents into the system and allow your employees access to view these. Because HR Planner is a web-based system, of course, all of your staff have access to the system 24/7. As long as they've got access to the internet, they can log in and view these documents, do anything they wish within the system. So sort of things you might host here, HR information. Yeah, you want all of your employees to have access to documentation around HR policies, but perhaps in your corporate section and your business and finance information, well, you want to restrict that to your senior managers. Again, you as an HR person, as a sysadmin person within the system, have control over what information your other employees can view. So with documents, there's also an area on each employee where you can upload documents. So these would be personal documents to this particular person. So here you can create your folders, you can upload your documentation. These may be around employee contracts and CVs and appraisal forms and that sort of thing, which relate to this particular individual. And a couple of other things. Yes, there's a salary section, so you can track employee salary over time. There's an expenses area too, so employees can raise expense claims, they can attach expense items, they can upload receipts that relate to that item, and much like a leave request, they can submit that expense claim to somebody to authorize. And with all things that need authorizing in HR Planner, you can steer them to different people. So maybe that the employee's leave requests go to their line manager, but expenses might go straight to accounts and so on. And so you can steer them quite easily. There's a skills section too, just finally on this. So skills is where you can create lists of skills for employees and then attribute them to those employees. So I've added in something like first aid and driver's license and so on. And with these, you can upload documents in support of that skill. So here we can upload driver's license, not my actual driver's license, by the way. And you can set expiries on skills as well. So they might be skills that need renewing on an annual basis. So you can set an expiry date on skills and then have people notified as those skills come up for renewal. So that's a sort of broad outline. To talk about specific employee engagement areas, that there's two, and one you've probably already spotted down here, which is our employee engagement area. And engagement in HR Planner, this is really the facility to be able to create questionnaires, distribute those questionnaires electronically to your employees, and then view the results of those either individually or as a group. Where I see these being used most often, certainly with individuals, is for things like the onboarding of new employees. So perhaps creating just a simple checklist of things for your new starters to acknowledge that they've done. So you might be asking them to, have they read their employment contract? Are they aware of the IT password security rules and so on? And just getting the employee to tick that they've read and understood these documents. You can get them to sign documents as well. And then on completion, these forms that you've created are automatically saved to the employee's record. So it's there for them to see, for their line manager to see that they've acknowledged and done these things. So a simple checklist is one example. You might also use it for just seeing how the onboarding process is going. So at the end of the onboarding processing for your new employees, creating a questionnaire which asks, well, how did that process go? And should we do more of something else or less of the other, and so on. And just creating that sort of feedback loop to make sure that that process is always improving and delivering as you need it to. So employees, so individual forms going to employees. But you can, of course, also create sort of broader, wider surveys to the organisation as a whole. And again, common examples I see are sort of surveys around working from home. Employee satisfaction is another common example. And there is a library built into the system of forms, common forms here. But you can, of course, create your own and save them in your own system. So a nice, useful library to use. So distributing your forms to a wider audience gives you then the ability to sort of view those results. And with viewing those results, you can do it in a number of ways, actually. So I can look at individuals. So down here at the bottom of the screen, I can see the individuals that have completed this or not. And by clicking on that, I can see how this individual has responded to that questionnaire. And again, I can go to their record and view this if I wanted to as well. But I can also view those results across the organisation. So how did we as an organisation respond to that? If I just make that a little bit bigger. So here I can see how the responses have responded to each question. And I can change the format of these if that's what I want to do, and so on. But what I can also do is change these results, not to look at everybody as a whole, but to look at perhaps particular segments of this. So here I can see that a sizable chunk of our employees have been working from home for less than 6 months. Well, if I just want to see their results, I can. So I can filter out and see, okay, well, the people that have been working from home for less than 6 months, well, they think this about, or answered the questions in this way. And so you can drill down and get a little bit more information around the results of that survey. So that's two areas of using the forms, but both of those are really led by HR or the line managers. So it's HR who is instigating that process and sending those forms out to employees. What you can also do is create questionnaires which actually reverse that process, so that you're giving the employees the ability to initiate the feedback. And so these would be useful for things like complaint forms and suggestion forms, that you can allow your employees to start off that process. And a great little tool within this is that the employee has the ability to submit these forms either as themselves or anonymously. So there might be particular questionnaires, particular bits of feedback that employees are more likely to complete and engage with if they're anonymous. And they truly are anonymous. So replies to these from employees aren't attached to their record. They go into a folder of forms that are anonymous for HR to view. So employee engagement forms. The second area in HR Planner is here in the reports section. And the reports, again, a complete report designing tool within the system here. So you have all of that data in the system. It's great to be able to get it out. And once more, there's a series of sort of standard reports which are sat in the library there for you, but you can create your own reports based on any of the fields in the system too. And what you might use these for is really getting ahead of the employee engagement. And with our experience with absence management, there's two issues really. One is too much leave and too many people being away, and the other is the opposite, and employees not taking enough time or not managing their leave allowance through the year as best as they might. And I'm sure you saw there, just with 2 clicks of the mouse, I can run a leave summary report. And if I just zoom in a little, if I can, no, not quite. So here's just a list of my employees and what allowances they have remaining. So this might trigger some engagement because I can see some chaps down here. Okay, well, John here has got 7 days remaining, so he's doing pretty well. But a chap right at the top here, Luke, well, he hasn't used any of his leave at all. So it might be that there is some sort of engagement that's needed with this employee to work out why that might be. And also the Bradford factor is another report that's built into the system. And here you have the ability, again, just with a couple of clicks. If you're not aware of the Bradford factor, I'm sure you chaps are actually, but Bradford factor is a way of tracking sick leave, and it's weighted more towards the number of incidents that people have had rather than the amount of time that people have had of sick leave. So I can see here again, just with a couple of clicks, that I've got the chap at the top of the list, and there may be perfectly good reasons for him to be there, but that might trigger some engagement as to why our good friend Doug here is having so many incidents of sick leave. But more importantly, it might be more useful to realise that, well, it's the operations team. I've got 3 of my top 4 at the league table here are part of the operations team. So what's going on with operations that means that they're having significantly more absence events than the other departments. So that was a very quick sort of run through, really, of some of the features that are helping with the employee engagement. I know that was fast, but I will do at the end of the session. Not only will we distribute clearly just the recording of today's webinar, but there'll be an invite on there too to book some time with me to have a little bit of a slower demonstration of our HR Planner software. Maybe there's some things we can do to help with that. So with that, if I stop sharing my screen, or if there's been any questions that have come in the meantime, or if there's anything further you want to say at all, Jane.
No, not at all. It's been lovely to have the chance to share my experience. If anyone's got any follow-up questions, just shout via Steve, via Target HR, or connect to me on LinkedIn, and I can share any best practice. So yeah, have a great week, and thank you for asking me to share my thoughts.
No problem at all. Thank you very much. Last call on any questions at all from anybody before we disappear. You can come through on chat or raise them yourself if you wish. No, looks as though we've covered everything. Right. Good work. Thank you, everybody. Take care.